start just now because Dennis is still lost apparently, so he can come in and speak when he gets here. I'm Sarah Collins, I'm the branch secretary of Unison in East Ayrshire. Unison's position on independence is neutral. We don't have a position at all, but what Unison wants to do is try and facilitate the debate about independence so that everybody in the community gets to hear both sides of the story of the debate. Unison challenges both sides, so it's not a purely neutral stance. And there's some papers at the back and maybe on some people's seats about what Unison thinks the independence debate should look like. So it's about values that trade unions obviously respect, like equality, fairness, good, strong public sector, etc. There's a lot of material up the back and on all the seats for everybody to have a wee look at. You can have a look at that, and then when it comes to the question and answer session, maybe put some of those arguments to the speakers today. We have today Graham Pearson, who's an MSP for South Scotland, and Pauline Bryan, who writes for the Red Paper Collective, and they're going to be arguing the no position. We've also got Carolyn Leckie, who's going to speak from Women for Independence, and Dennis Canavan when he gets here as well, who's former Labour MSP and is now on the Yes Scotland Advisory Board. Just to quickly explain how we're going to do the debate, I'll give each speaker about 5 minutes or so just to put forward their position initially, then we'll open it up for questions and contributions from people. We are a bit tight for time, so if I could ask that people try and ask questions.
You guys use the microphone?
Do you want me to use the microphone? Of course. I think we're going to close the door. Someone's going to close the door, and if that doesn't work, I'll put the microphone on. It's just that it echoes a little bit, the microphone.
It sounds more like karaoke.
I think it is, I know. It's actually ballroom dancing. Where was I? Yeah, we're going to open it up to the floor then for some questions and contributions. If everyone could keep their questions quite brief and to the point, that I think most people would get the most out of the debate and the discussion tonight. The Kilmarnock Standard are here, they'll be doing a report on it next week, and if it's okay with everybody, the debate will be filmed as well and put on YouTube, and different groups can access it then, and Unison will certainly be putting it around the East Ayrshire branch so that people can have a look at it when if they've not managed along tonight. If anybody's on Twitter, there's a hashtag that we've got, it's EA Unison IndieRef. If anybody's following the East Ayrshire Unison branch, you can have a look at that. We'll try and finish with the questions about just before 8:30 or so, and then I'll come back to all the speakers and they can sum up for a few minutes at the end. Everybody should have ballot papers on their chairs, 1 or 2 of them. If you could fill them in just now, somebody's going to come round with a bucket to put it in, and we'll do the same at the end of the debate. And that way we can see whether or not there's been any change in people's opinions, and again the Kilmarnock Standard will print the results of that. So, just to take the order that people are sitting in. Oh. Has everybody got one? Yep. No. Not everybody might have it. Some just think we ran out of them actually. Sorry. Didn't really expect quite as good a turnout as this in such a nice evening. But I'll just start the debate. Graham will speak first, and then Carolyn to my left, Pauline and Dennis can speak at the end, okay? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. I'll speak as loud as I can, and hopefully you'll all be able to hear me. If anybody can't hear me, if they indicate, then I'll use the microphone if that's necessary. To begin with, can I say that it's great that so many have turned out tonight to enter into a discussion on what is the most important issue facing Scotland, certainly in our lifetimes and probably many lifetimes before that. Those of you who listen to the news at tea time would know the latest economic figures were announced about gross domestic profit and how we're doing economically across the UK. Robert Peston and the other economists were discussing the figures. Peston, I think everybody would acknowledge, has a real understanding of these things, indicated that he described the figures that are published quarterly and annually as at best a guess, and a guess with an incomplete knowledge of the background that make the figures up. I think that's quite a useful way of looking at the discussions leading to independence. No matter who you listen to in this debate over the next few months, What you've got is a best estimate, a guess on the benefit of the information that's available, and people put their interpretation as how that might affect us for the future and how they see the future, applying their best guess. So the experts in the room here tonight, I think, are you. You're the people who experience Scotland day in, day out. It's your lives and your futures that we're speaking about. And you can listen to what's said, and you can apply your thoughts on what you see. I've got 5 minutes to make a number of points. Currently in Scotland, we have a parliament in Edinburgh, which was created within this United Kingdom and devolved a number of powers which are important to you in terms of public life in Scotland. Schools, hospitals, police, transport, all underscored by a Scottish Parliament. And it does its best to secure the best economic outcomes that are possible for the Scottish community within that UK partnership. It's estimated by these experts, both at a UK level and I think generally accepted in terms of the Barnett formula, that in public spending terms, we are around £1,200 per head better off in public spending because of the way public funds are applied in the Scottish context. Because we're part of the United Kingdom, we have an influence in terms of policy in a world way. The United Kingdom has been respected for its application of human rights. We are listened to when it comes to that world relationships that we play a part in. We are part of the United Nations and we're on the Security Council. And I think for the most part, with some very well-known exceptions, we've got a lot to be proud of in what we've done in the last 100 years as that UK entity. We have some of the best universities in the world, created within the context of a UK platform, but overseen and guided from a Scottish Parliament. And we must remember that hasn't arrived overnight. That's taken centuries to build, but it's been built in the context of that partnership. We have a Scottish NHS that we are rightly proud of, built on the back of a Labour policy introduced after the Second World War, but we are independent of the NHS in England and Wales, but we have a relationship with that NHS system, and there are people who live in this area who, when the NHS in Scotland were either unable to provide specialist services or believed there were better specialist services in England, they were transferred there and those services were provided. And then the big argument about keeping the pound and our involvement in interest rates and how we play our part in influencing how those interest rates and the policy in terms of the pound is directed. There's no doubt in my mind, just to cut to the quick, could Scotland exist as an independent country post a referendum? The answer's got to be yes. The question is, do we want to be independent of England and Wales? Do we want to separate from our biggest home market for sales and the market that we sell most to? Do we want to create the differences between England and Scotland in terms of immigration policy and the impacts that that might have in the years ahead? These are decisions that we need to take, knowing what the impacts of that might be. The final thing I'll say, given that there is only 5 minutes and I must be very close to that, is that in saying to our friends, our relatives, our families in England that we seek to be separated from them and that we want to be independent, we can't think that that decision will be taken by us and that the English won't take a view on the implications for them. We can't believe that our relationships will be maintained as they currently are. And it's for you to make an estimate of what the impact on that change of relationship might have for our jobs, for our relationships in terms of defence, foreign policy, and a whole range of very important influences that we play our part in. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let it move on. I'll be happy as best I can to answer any questions that you want to raise, and hopefully that opens the door to a lot of the issues that you want to question me on.
Thank you very much, Graham. We're now going to hear from Carolyn Leckie, who's speaking from Women for Independence.
Thank you. Wait, does that twist round?
Do you want to use it?
I really like to hold it because I'll swing it about. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm here from Women for Independence. We do only have 5 minutes. There's a lot of things that Graham said that I would like to respond to, but I'm not going to be able to, so I'm going to try and discipline myself and stick to what I was intending to say in the first place. And for me, overwhelmingly, independence is about democracy. For most of my lifetime, I have lived under a government that Scotland did not vote for. And no nation in the world, I think, would be content with that. Especially when Graham talked about the powers that are devolved. But there might be a lot of things you care about. I'm sure there are a lot of things you care about. Perhaps it's tax. Perhaps it's the welfare state. Perhaps it's financial services. Perhaps you're worried about payday lenders, exorbitant interest rates. Perhaps you're worried about equality. Perhaps you're worried about trade union legislation. All of these things are retained by Westminster. None of these things are on the table in terms of the Westminster parties proposing additional devolved powers. None of them. Now, you think you should live in a country where you should have control of these things, then the democratic case for independence is overwhelming. And Graham is right, you have to make a judgment. I trust your judgment. I trust your judgment in the context of an independent Scotland that you will vote for a government that you want, where the policies, once we have the power, will be under debate. I trust the people of Scotland to vote for a government that I'm more likely to agree with than leaving it to the chance of what we get delivered at Westminster. You might have looked at the polls recently in terms of the European elections. UKIP are leading. You can contrast that to proposals in the White Paper. I'm no SNP. Sometimes people say they don't want to vote for independence because they don't like Alex Salmond. Now, I'm quite unusual in that, and I will love him with it. But I have to say to people who don't like Alex Salmond or the SNP that, do you want to stick with the UK because you like David Cameron? You like Nigel Farage? You like Ed Miliband? Maybe you do like Ed Miliband. Are you guaranteed that Ed Miliband will be the Prime Minister in 2015? So you are going to have to take your chances. But I would argue that the chances of your concerns and values and principles being reflected in a government that you actually vote for are much greater with independence. I've heard that argument about Alex Salmond, and I've heard the solidarity argument, and I think that's particularly relevant since Unison are hosting this debate. When I was a Unison branch secretary, I organised a number of strikes. And those were successful strikes. If we had waited until we had solidarity across the whole union of Unison to be able to wage those struggles, we wouldn't get anything. You have to do what's effective. You have to do what works. Is Unison still got the same structure whereby you have to go down to London to get the Industrial Action Committee to agree to have industrial action here? That's a subversion of solidarity. It's actually holding back people from struggling and achieving progress. And I think that an independent Scotland would be exactly that. It would be a reflection of values that are progressive. It's inspired me to get involved in politics again. I was pissed off with politics. A lot so, particularly as a woman. The chance of independence, having the opportunity to write a constitution from scratch. Can anybody tell me what the UK constitution is? I doubt it, because it takes at least one semester or two doing a law degree to find out how the UK constitution works. You can't pin it down, you can't have it, you can't put it in your back pocket. But with the opportunity of a blank slate in terms of writing a constitution that people would be involved in, that we could set principles of equality and fairness The protection of natural resources, as Iceland attempted to do in crowdsourcing their constitution. Do you think that opportunity is going to be on offer from a Westminster government of any colour? There's nobody proposing it. There's nobody proposing to repeal the anti-trade union laws. There's nobody proposing to deal with the exorbitant interest rates, not in any meaningful way, in terms of payday loan companies. There's nobody proposing to really get to grips with equalities legislation to avoid women having to fight for years and years and years and years and die while waiting to achieve equal pay. All of these things are reserved to Westminster. And the last point I'm going to make is it's often argued that being within the UK is a safety net. I don't see that safety net in a UK Westminster context. I see that safety net that was built after the Second World War being dismantled, particularly in England, when you look at the NHS and what's happening to it. When you look at the attacks on disabled people, when you look at the attacks on benefits, and when you look at the proposals to have a welfare cap, which were supported by the vast majority of MPs in Westminster, only 22 MPs in the whole of Westminster opposed it. 2 Labour MPs in Scotland opposed it. Now, if the alternative to independence is vote Labour, and I usually avoid being party political, but that's the choice that's been put forward in a progressive context. If you have progressive values, your choice is vote Labour, vote no. You have to make the judgment about the chances, given your experience of being a trade unionist or a community member, with successive Westminster governments, whether you trust that progressive politics and values and principles and fairness and equality and public ownership will be delivered in a Westminster context. There's no guarantee it'll be delivered in a Scottish parliamentary context, but do you know who will decide whether it is or not? Us. Because we'll have a vote that actually works, we'll have a vote that is effective. And if you think that there's a reason to vote against independence because you don't like the incumbent political party in the Scottish Parliament just now, can you tell me which Westminster government is the one that persuades you to remain within the UK?
Thank you very much for that, Carolyn. We've now got Pauline Bryan from the Red Paper Collective.
Thank you.
Do you want the microphone?
I think I better, just in case. Big monster. I think we got an idea from that applause that there's, I think, quite a lot of sympathy for Karen's case, as she put very well there. But I think I'd like to suggest that many of us here have something very important in common, and that is that we're socialists. I'm not saying everybody here is, but I sense there's probably an underlying feeling of support for socialism. And what we're looking for then is the best possible route for enabling working people to achieve greater power in order to democratise our economy and to redistribute wealth, to have a sustainable economy and to fight for equalities. Those are the things we can agree on. We agree on the purpose. What we're discussing is the strategy we're going to take to achieve that. And I think on that basis, this argument isn't a place for anger or for denunciations. It's a rational argument about the best way of moving forward. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, and I think some of us might have been at meetings where things have got a bit sort of hairy and that we're drawn into seeing things in a way that assumes bad faith on the part of people who are putting different positions. I don't see it that way. I think that what we're doing is trying to come to an understanding of the best way forward. And one thing is quite clear, there's no absolutely clear right or wrong about where powers should be held. We actually give up powers upwards to the United Nations. We look for global rules that should apply in terms of human rights. We don't expect each country to devise its own. If we had a democratic European Union, we might be pleased that that is where things relating to conditions of employment or trade union rights are established across the whole European Union. Unfortunately, we've got a union in Europe that's more based on the needs of business than based on the needs of people. But in theory, that would be a better way of establishing those standards so that there wasn't a race to the bottom trying to outdo each other in terms of getting a cheap workforce. So we do accept that things can be done at different levels. And one important level that we shouldn't neglect is local government. There are things that are identified locally, needs that are identified locally, that are better delivered locally. So there isn't this sort of idea that we can say, well, there is only one unit of government. As it happens, Scotland is a very good unit of government. And the Scottish Parliament, I think, has demonstrated that there are very useful things that can be done at a Scottish level that do deliver better for the people for Scotland, that respond to the elections that we have, that put people there. But I think there are also things that would not be effective at a Scottish level, and that is withstanding the attacks and demands of the globalised economy that is out there. I would argue that in order to resist that, we will face a situation where the economy of Scotland isn't owned in Scotland. We have the majority of our larger employers in Scotland are actually owned externally. The levers of power that we could use are external. Retaining economic power at a UK level does make sense in this way, that if we're going to resist the demands of the global economy, then we need the strength, the size, and say if you can't hear me, I'll try and talk a bit louder. Is that okay for people? Yeah, it's better than fighting that. I would argue that if the demands for a referendum had come up from working people, whether it had been based on a labour movement, a socialist movement, demand for a referendum for independence, then we would have gone into this referendum in a very different way than we're going into it now. What we would be saying to people is that we'll have to fight, we'll have to resist the attacks on our economy that would come as they came in Cuba, as they came in Chile, Venezuela and elsewhere. But we're not going into it on that basis. We're going into it on the basis that everything will be better, everything will be easier, that we will actually be richer, things will be fairer, when there is no understanding that our economy will not be within our power to deliver that. if we'd been asked to commit ourselves to that sort of struggle, we'd be in a very different situation now. We wouldn't have people telling us that we'll be wealthier. They'd be saying, we've got to fight for this. I would actually be daunted by that, but I would be in there supporting it. We've been given a false idea of what is possible. What we believe in the Red Paper Collective doesn't preclude independence, but it does reject the independence that's going to be on offer on the 18th of September. And that is the independence of the white paper of the SNP. I love Carolyn's idea that somehow we start with a clean slate on the day after. It's never happened like that in any other country. The party that takes you into independence is the party that would quite logically expect, and people would expect, to be the leading voice in writing that constitution. And we know what's in their constitution. We know it's the monarchy. We know it's NATO. We know it's the EU as is now. We know it's, I hope they would like sterling to be the currency. That isn't a change, that is more of the same. So I would say it's not a country, it's not a flag, it's about working people and what binds us together.
Thank you very much for that, Pauline. And now we've got Dennis. We've got about 5 minutes as well.
Thank you for inviting me to speak, and my apologies for being a wee bit late. I'm a convert to the cause of independence, and my conversion is based mainly on my experience, particularly my parliamentary experience, 26 years as a Labour Member of Parliament in Westminster, followed by 8 years as an independent member of the Scottish Parliament. I've been retired now for 7 years, and that's given me time to think. And I have come to the conclusion, after a great deal of reflection, that Westminster is completely out of touch with the people of Scotland. The Scottish Parliament, on the other hand, is not perfect, but it responds far more readily, far more positively to the needs and the wishes and the aspirations of the people of Scotland. Let me give you a few examples on things like land reform, on things like care of the elderly, on things like financial support for students, on things like a publicly owned free national health service. The Scottish Parliament has shown itself to be far more progressive and far more radical than Westminster. The Scottish Parliament has only been in existence for 50 years, and there's no reason why a reciprocal arrangement, a cross-border reciprocal arrangement on the NHS shouldn't continue after independence. However, despite my praise of what the Scottish Parliament has delivered, the fact of the matter is that the powers of the Scottish Parliament are very limited. Most of the big economic decisions are still taken at Westminster. And I say to myself this: if the Scottish Parliament can be responsible for important services and important legislative matters such as education and the National Health Service, why should it not be responsible for deciding whether we should have nuclear weapons, whether we should be involved in illegal wars, whether we should be allowing bankers to stuff their pockets with big fat bonuses and bring the country almost to the brink of ruin? And what about this bedroom tax? A bedroom tax would never have seen the light of day if we had an independent Scottish Parliament. Now, it's perhaps understandable that Westminster MPs defend the status quo, they defend the Union. I mean, that's their power base. But for the life of me, I honestly find it difficult to understand how members of the Scottish Parliament, like Graham, for whom I have great respect, I honestly fail to understand their attitude. They seem to be saying, yes, we would like to grow the economy, yes, we would like to eradicate child poverty, yes, we would like to get rid of nuclear weapons from Scotland, yes, we would like to restore trade union rights. But when you ask them, Do you want the responsibility? Do you want the tools to do the job? They seem to be saying, no thanks. It's almost as if they're saying, we're not up to the job, we'd rather leave it to the posh boys down at Westminster. Well, the posh boys at Westminster have had their chance, and their track record speaks for itself. So what's the alternative? I used to imagine, like Mary, that the only alternative was the return of a Labour government at Westminster committed to socialist policies, bringing about higher standards of social justice, not just to the people of Scotland, but the people of the whole of the United Kingdom. But then along came that other posh boy, a posh Westminster boy called Tony Blair. He ditched socialism in order to win votes in Middle England. New Labour widened the gap between rich and poor. He then got involved in illegal and unethical warfare. Labour has lost its soul, and there's no sign of the Labour Party recovering its soul unless, and I might get time to expand on this later, unless there is an independent Scotland, and I foresee a socialist Labour government then possibly rediscovering its long lost soul. So, Westminster Rule has produced a coalition government we did not vote for, and an official opposition which offers no radical change. With independence, the Scottish Parliament will have the political and economic clout to do so much more on issues like getting rid of child poverty, on issues like fighting for the right to work, on issues like improved public services, and of course creating a fairer society, and not just in Scotland. I'm not a nationalist, I'm not a member of the SNP, and I don't see independence as simply being an agenda that's going to be dictated by the SNP, far from it. I don't like being described as a nationalist. I prefer the term internationalist, because I believe that we ought to retain a close relationship with our near neighbours, but that should be a relationship based on an equal partnership, rather than one partner being absolutely dominant in that relationship. And I want to see us continuing to have a good working relationship with our friends and relatives and people elsewhere, not just in what is now called the United Kingdom, but also in Europe and the rest of the world. So in conclusion, I see independence not as an end in itself, but as a means towards creating a better Scotland, a more prosperous Scotland, a fairer Scotland, and giving the people of Scotland not just the opportunity to choose their own government, but the opportunity to play their part in the international community in order to help to build a better world.
Thank you very much for that, Dennis. I'm going to open it up to the floor now, so anybody who's got any questions, I think all the speakers gave you a bit of food for thought there. I'll just take a couple of questions at first. If you're directing it to one particular speaker, I'll also give the other speakers... Sorry.
Is that your first question?
Yep. Somebody wants attention. I'll also give the other speakers a chance to have some input to that as well. Yeah, someone's going to go and sort that out. Okay. So I'll just take a couple just now. Yourself? Maybe it's better just 2 seconds.
Can you put your question to music?
You mentioned about the relationship with England.
Yeah.
If Scotland became independent, they're all the same, right? Having relatives in England, okay? I've got relatives in County Dublin. I've got relatives in Cambridgeshire. I've got relatives in London, right? Now, when I go across to see my relatives in County Dublin, I cross the border from the United Kingdom into the Republic of Ireland, which is a separate country.
It is.
Yeah. Right? Now, 3 things The sign tells me it's going to kilometres to miles. The white line changes to yellow line once you close the border in the public, and the phone starts moving because it goes into the island. Right? But the guards are not standing at the border telling you you're for the United Kingdom, so you can't get in. Right? I can pass freely into another country, a foreign country, and still somebody else is trying to help them. So can you tell me, would it still be the same then, if I'm going to visit my relatives in Ayrshire? Because according to the local campaigns, I'd be stopped by Cumbria police force in Brecon if they asked where I was going. Failing that, I'm not English because I've got English relatives that I'm very fond of, I love, I care about. The relationship still would be the same because I'm not English, I don't hate English. But what I would like to be is when you're talking about a relationship, as Caroline mentioned and Dennis mentioned, right? We're not an equal partnership in this marriage. Scotland to me is the abusive, the person in the marriage has been abused by the dominating partner. And I think it's about time the abusive partner was kept to their side and the person to being abused was left on with a life in peace. Can you tell me what would happen then regarding borders and that if Scotland came independent? Because I don't see there being a problem because there's not a problem between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland.
Graham?
I mean, it's a good analogy that you give there about the marriage and the abusive relationship and all the rest of it. And just to continue that analogy, I, in all my adult life, have never known a divorce to end happily, and where each of the partners work out. I don't know your partner would agree with you. It's not in my experience that many divorces end in happiness for both partners. And there's a real difficulty here. We've heard a lot about what this new future will be. It will be fairer, it will be brighter, we will be better off, and life is going to be sweeter under this new arrangement. And if your judgment is that that's feasible, then it's different from mine. The current approach, which seems to be indicated about the future and this new bright future, is that we will have a different immigration policy. We will adopt a different view of allowing people into Scotland from what would be the view in England and Wales. Now, whether our view is right or wrong, let's put that aside and let's not argue about that tonight. But if the policies are different, and Southern Ireland and Ayrshire is a good example, because we currently have, and have for a long time, a difficulty where folk have come into the UK via Southern Ireland, Dublin, through the border and across into Kilmarnock. And at Kilmarnock, until very recently, there was no one there to greet them. And what used to happen is that migrants coming in through that port received a postcard which said that the border agency isn't here today, but there's a phone number in the postcard, and tomorrow will you phone that number and let them know you've arrived. And the experience is that more than 80% who came in through that port immediately went south and headed to the home counties, London and all these other places. So logic would tell you that if we are going to deliver a separate country with separate policies in terms of those relationships, we do put a pressure on the English to decide how will we maintain our border and our policies, which will be different from Scotland. And we don't know what the answer to that will be. It could well be that they decide that they need to have some kind of control. I would hope that that wasn't the case. But to just put your head in the sand and say, this will never happen, Scotland will be able to go its own, we'll be able to make a load of judgments about the future for ourselves, because we now have the powers. We've had the powers to waive our income tax for years. Nobody has made any attempt to lower or raise income tax in the Scottish context with that limited power that was available. It could have been tested. So that thing about our relationships internationally will have an impact, and what that impact will be, we can only guess at this stage. And it depends on how we decide to deliver on that migration policy. If it is a genuinely open door at the Scottish end, then England and Wales will need to take some kind of steps in order to decide how they maintain their policy, and who knows what those steps would be. Is that a fair answer? Whether you agree with it or not?
No, because Her Majesty's government in Westminster can't stop them coming out from France to do. So how are they going to stop them coming out from here?
Well, I think.
Okay, I'm going to let somebody else answer.
But you can't see it. When you come in through Dover, you know that you've come in from another country, because there are the guards there and there are attempts to control.
Okay, I'm going to bring somebody else in to ask a question just now. Yourself at the back there.
I'm surprised that although you spoke very eloquently, that for a man that gets a really good wage to represent people in South of Scotland, that you don't seem to realise the rules of Europe and the freedom of travel within Europe. I was in college and people were travelling from Belgium all the way to Spain for the weekend. So it's scary on your part. No, it is clearly, unless you are in a UK ruled England, which is a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? But you are saying to this gentleman here who's got free freedom to travel, visit his relatives, and things that would be so different. And the whole reason of having an independent country, right, is so that we can have social justice, but we can have people that actually want to represent the people here. I'm totally in favour of immigration. I can see no negative side to immigration, colour, origin. There needs to be free movement of resources and skills, right? The current government is playing up immigration because of you, and to me that's what you're doing, and I'm surprised.
Can I answer that?
Can I
I'd like to answer that. I demand to answer that.
I'm going to bring Carolyn and yourself.
Wait a minute, no, I need to answer that particular point. I'm here to give an honest reply to points that are put to me. I defy anybody to say that I resist immigration. I have always believed that we should welcome people on our borders, and I've done my bit to protect people who are suffering elsewhere in the world, and I understand why they want to come here. I'm answering the point that says, if we have a policy in Scotland which is different from England, and we're allowing people from outside the European market area, that's where that other country may well take steps. I might not agree with the steps it would take, but it would be wrong to ignore the fact that they might take steps, and when they take the steps, we as members of this island will still need to go through these control areas if they create them. And to say that that will never happen is just to ignore the reality that there is a possibility it could happen. I would hate it. I wouldn't support it, and I want nothing to do with it. But the other thing that you need to accept is there are people in our community who do fear these changes, and they do think that their jobs are being stolen. I don't agree with that, and I say in the doorsteps every day I don't agree with that. So I just want to deal with that point.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring Carolyn in there because she wants to make a point, and if people could put their hands up so I can take a little note of who wants to ask a question next. Carolyn?
I'll just try and be 2 minutes because I think it's really important, a lot of questions, and we get into other subject areas, but it's a very important issue, and I think one point, free movement works both ways. There are Scottish people, English people, Welsh people, Irish people, free moving all over Europe all the time. It's a two-way process. Working in Europe, living in Europe, retiring in Europe, buying houses in Europe, having holiday homes in Europe, everything. And our biggest problem would be see the people that have left Scotland to live elsewhere, see if they all come back. Then we would have a problem. I'm proud that in Scotland we've had a different attitude. And even though I'm no SNP, it was mentioned that the white paper wasn't progressive. There are some elements of it that aren't progressive, but actually, in comparison to Westminster, there's a lot of progressive things. For example, no citizenship test. I don't know if anybody's seen the questions that people are asked to pass a citizenship test. I couldn't pass it. Automatic residency. Automatic citizenship on residency is a proposal of the SNP in the White Paper. Shutting down Gable forever is a proposal in the White Paper. That's not happening for Westminster, and it's not going to happen for Westminster because they are definitely pandering to UKIP. And I think people would be less frightened if there was more people who were prepared to speak up, and if there wasn't a media that was being absolutely disgusting and promoting division and hate against people who are coming from other countries. And beyond Europe, coming from countries that the UK has been party to bombing and exploiting over decades and hundreds of years, causing the immigration in the first place. I want to be back part of a progressive country that looks outward into the world, has an internationalist perspective, is a force for good in the world, is respected in the world, and isn't feared because we have bombed and exploited as the UK. The UK is a regressive force in the world. We need to accept that. And it would be good for people in England and Wales and the North of Ireland to be free from that regressive force and have the opportunity to develop a decent reputation in the world.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. I'm going to take 2 questions just now. Yourself at the back and then yourself with the white shirt on, okay? Yep.
Several of the panel mentioned solidarity. Independent Scotland removed nuclear weapons. Can you think of a greater act of solidarity with people everywhere than taking that step?
Okay, thank you. And yourself?
The National Service Bill is about to go through its second reading in the UK House of Commons. I'd like to know, as a woman and a mother, what guarantees, better together, so you talked a lot about no guarantees in an independent Scotland. What guarantees can they offer me that if I vote no, my 2 children won't be forced to fight in an illegal war?
Okay, Pauline, do you want to start?
I think the point about Trident was put very well there. You're going to move it. That's not an act of solidarity. Getting rid of Trident is an act of solidarity. Not moving it somewhere else in the UK. I think yes. So it's good enough for the people in Devonport or in Wales to have it. We should be uniting with those people to get rid of Trident, not to move it. And
because surely we in an independent Scotland can make the decisions we can make. I would agree with you. It would be great if the USSR, Russia, America, and all of them have nuclear weapons got rid of them. That's what we should all be working towards. But the thing we can do the day after we become independent is start working to make sure that we are not contributing to nuclear weapons on this planet. That's what we can do straight away. And I agree with you, we keep working to try and get everyone else to take the same steps as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but what you are suggesting is that that's going to happen. And it's not. What we have been promised by the SNP, who I do actually believe will be the government, is that they will take the earliest steps possible while joining NATO. As a Scottish member of NATO, they're going to negotiate the withdrawal of Trident. Do you think that's going to happen quickly? I don't think so. I think there will be a protracted negotiation over this that will be lost in the mists of time while NATO accepts Scotland and the European Union accepts Scotland on their terms. By the time that, if it does come to it and it is being moved, we have wasted years when we should have been, as we have been, campaigning for the removal of Trident and in working with people who suggest we're in an abusive relationship with. We're not in an abusive relationship with the people of England. We're not in, I mean, they are our comrades. They are the people that we have much more in common with, the Jim McCalls and the Brian Souters.
What happens to me is the dominating partner. I'm not saying somebody that's English doesn't like me. That's what
well,
the point I was making was...
Can we just let Pauline finish, please?
Yeah, but what we mustn't forget is what we've got in common with the people of England, and that's far more than we have with many people in Scotland, and the people who have most power in Scotland. And those are the people who have the money, the landed estates. Those are the people that we will be challenging, whether we're in an independent Scotland or otherwise. If there is any chance of I come from an ILP tradition. That was my first political involvement and has remained at the centre of my political thinking ever since. If ever I thought that people were going to be called up for national service, I would be... we're not having national service reintroduced, but...
There will be children between the ages of 16 and 24 being forced to commit to 2 years, and only those with the serious mental or physical impairment will be excluded.
There will not be... They will not... The day that there is national service reintroduced, where people are recruited to go and join up and fight, I would hope that we will all be on the streets and we will fight that bitterly and to the end. That is such a step that whether if you would leave, if we would leave that, how can I? In terms of guarantees, none of us can give guarantees. We can't give guarantees for what will happen in Scotland. We can't give guarantees what will happen in Britain. What we can do as a movement, as people who are committed to peace and against nuclear weapons, is to fight that and win people to that idea. Because I tell you one thing, it isn't... there are people across Scotland who wouldn't agree with us. We've got to fight to have there first to win them to these ideas. I'm not a pacifist, but I certainly would... I'm not a pacifist because I would fight against the reintroduction of national service.
Thanks, Paul. Dennis?
There is one thing that we can guarantee, and it's this, that in an independent Scotland, the people of Scotland will be guaranteed to have a government elected by the people of Scotland and accountable to the people of Scotland. And I have no doubt, I have complete faith in the people of Scotland that they throw this national service bill out, it would never see the light of day. Now, on this business about solidarity, solidarity is not something that was invented by the United Kingdom, and it's not something that is dependent upon the unity of any kingdom. Real solidarity is international. It knows no bounds. In Scotland, we've got a great saying that we're all Jock Danson's bairns. I suppose one translation of that might be we're all God's children, but whether you believe in God or otherwise, another translation might be we're all citizens of the world, we're all members of the human race. And that is true international solidarity of the working class, of solidarity of humanity. On nuclear weapons, the present Scottish Government has made it clear that it is their intention to remove nuclear weapons from Scottish soil and Scottish territorial waters within the first Parliament after the election, if they happen to form. I welcome a similar commitment from the Scottish Labour Party and other parties, the Scottish Green Party, we'd give one, I'm sure, and the Scottish Socialist Party. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is this, that even some of the bigwig military experts who supposedly know more about these things than I do and what the alternative options are south of the border, many of them have come to the conclusion that there is no alternative location for Trident. If we can get the thing out of Glasgow, then there's a strong possibility that we can get rid of it from the UK. And it's a silly argument anyway to say, oh, let us wait until we get a nuclear-free world before we take the first step. I've never believed that. I have always believed in the CND case for unilateral nuclear disarmament. Somebody's got to set the pace. Somebody's got to show the lead, and Scotland can show the lead by having a nuclear-free Scotland leading to a nuclear-free Britain, and hopefully a nuclear-free Europe, and eventually a nuclear-free world.
I apologise for sort of taking it back to where we were before, but I appreciate the greatness saying to the gentleman back earlier on about your opposition to a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric that's been coming out. However, one of the lines which has been used over and over again by the official Get Together campaign and representatives high up in it is the fact that if we vote yes, overnight we'll be turning all our friends and family in England into foreigners. Now, what I want to know is, what is the Get Together thinks is so bad about being a foreigner, if that was true? Because it seems like they're trying to evoke some kind of anti-foreigner, element in the population to use that to make people vote no. Why is being a foreigner so bad that it's a reason to vote against your own self-determination?
I don't accept this notion of foreigner and all the rest of it. It's something that's alien to me. I'm very akin to this notion of we belong to a world community. We don't belong to a tribal community. These are antiquated notions and they don't fit in the 21st century. I think that the reality again in looking at this whole argument about do we go for independence or do we not, when you sit in the Parliament, in the chamber of the Parliament, the reality is that we rarely hear the word England said in the Parliament. It's ignored. It's south of the border. I can almost play a tune every time it's said. That south of the border, what do they mean by south of the border? It's England they're always on about, that they daren't speak the word. And the notion that they didn't like the notion of separate, for instance. It's not separation, it's independence. There's all sorts of nuances there which come into the argument. The better together idea is that we have maintained a very strong tradition as the United Kingdom. There's a lot I think we can be proud of over the years as British people, as Scots within that British tradition. We have brought a lot of good into the world, as well as being involved in things that we're not proud of any longer. I would defy you to name any nation who has spent hundreds of years on this planet as a nation and always done the right thing. If you know who they are, tell me who they are, and we can have a look and see how they did it. Nations have always pursued things in their own interests, and in doing that, they've ensured that others have lost out in some of the arguments that have gone on, sometimes in terms of a war, in terms of conflict. Nobody wanted wars. I'm not used to the notion of wars. I wasn't brought up in the 60s and 70s to think that wars were actually something that we would engage in. As an adult with children, I was shocked that we got involved with the Argentinians in the Falklands. I never believed for a moment that when that fleet set sail, we would ever get involved in a conflict. And like everybody else who's in this room that witnessed it, you probably sat with a lump in their throat as they watched it develop. So I don't like this notion of foreigners. I don't like the idea that we deal in that kind of language. But it is the language of that nationalist movement.
It's best to get saying this, it's not the yes campaign.
Well, I can only think that those who would use that language is as a reaction to the way the arguments are presented to them, and that often happens. This whole political language is a culture of its own that I don't particularly recognise. I'm not someone who's lived in a political life all their days. I've worked a working life and come into this because I'm tired of the way politicians use language and use concepts. I'm a fairly simple-minded person and take things forward. I don't want to do people harm. I don't want people to do me harm. And I want to bring about real justice, real outcomes that make a difference in Scotland. And I would also want to see the United Kingdom to benefit from that too. But the reality is, in this Scotland that we have, there are many injustices ongoing as we speak, affecting our people that don't emanate from Westminster. It's about decisions that are taken here in Scotland. And that's a problem with decisions. Decisions sometimes benefit some people, but they act as a disbenefit to others. And this area here has suffered more than most when it came to decisions about jobs and about investment and about the future. That needs to change. That can change within the union. The union is 66 million people. It has clout. It has an ability to develop. We should have a louder voice in Westminster, and we should change the culture in Westminster to make sure it reflects more the culture that we are proud of and that we want to see for the future. That's what I'm a part of. It's about doing something positive, not something which is negative in my view. So I don't like corner, and it's not language that I would use.
Thanks, Graham. Can I ask the speakers to be as brief as possible, because time is running out. We've got 6 more speakers on the list, and if anybody else wants to put their hands up just now, we can get as many questions in as possible. Yourself there?
I'm a member of Unison, and I believe the trade unions organise and ensure the rights and improve the safety and advance the status of workers, their families and their communities. As members of the trade union and labour movement, we believe there's strength in unity and solidarity. My compassion for my fellow man, my solidarity with my brothers and sisters in the trade union and labour movement, and my anger at the vindictiveness of the Tory government doesn't end at the Scotland-England border. If I were to vote for separation, what message would I be sending to my Unison comrades and others in the rest of the UK? You can fight the Tories on your own, I'm all right, chap. Surely this is not the trade union and socialist way, we can do better.
I did try and anticipate this question because I'm tempted to take it a wee bit personally, because the idea that you support independence and self-determination and don't care about working class people in England is quite insulting. Well, I don't think that anybody in England, and particularly see when you listen to working class people when they're asked about the question of independence, I've heard a lot of people, particularly in the north of England, who say go for it. And I actually think if Scotland was independent and had political control, that the whole question of devolution for the regions in the north of England particularly would be back on the agenda, because there is an imbalance in England as well. There is wealth sucked into the south east and to London, and there's a democratic deficit as well. And I don't think independence in Scotland goes far enough in terms of the democratic deficit in Scotland either. I want to see a real democratisation from the bottom up throughout Scotland, and I think independence gives us that opportunity in Scotland, and I also think it acts as a beacon for people in England. But I don't see why the UK seems to be considered a kind of almost natural unit of organising the working class. As Dennis referred to earlier, the working class is the world over. Trade unions, I think, have a strategic question to ask themselves, because I think the trade union organisation, in terms of organising the working class and resisting big business and exploitation by their employers, is out of date. Because we're living in a globalised world, and the most effective way to win a war, to win things for your workers, is to organise in terms of your employer. And it goes back to when I was a Unison branch secretary at North Glasgow Hospitals. We organised strikes on the basis of North Glasgow because the members of North Glasgow were up for it and resisting. And I had a lot of battles within Unison for our right to be able to do that. And I think it's quite a similar thing. And the Scottish region of Unison, as it's still called a region in Unison, I believe, the Scottish region of Unison wasn't happy about a branch representing its members and implementing the democratic will of its members to take strike action, and resisted it. And we had to go and fight at the Industrial Action Committee in London to get the right to ballot. And we persuaded them twice, but on the third occasion we didn't. Now, that lack of democracy, that democratic deficit within Unison, and not respecting an autonomous branch's right to represent its members and organise its members to achieve those members' aims in their dispute, is a subversion of solidarity. It's using the UK-wide organisation of Unison to actually hold people back. And that's exactly what's happening within a UK context in terms of working class people. And the British state, as I had referred to earlier, is a nation state. It's an artificial construct. Every nation state is an artificial construct. You know, in my idealistic mind, I would like to aspire to a world where nation states were not the means of organising. But I need to ask you, if you don't support independence because you believe in internationalism, you believe in solidarity, why do you defend the UK somehow as a natural thing to organise the work, a natural organising unit of the working class?
It's a unit to make more. I'm pro-European. I want to see more integration in Europe. I'm quite blatant about that. I'm not a little Scotland or a little Britain. I want to see us moving more into Europe. Not everybody shares my view on that. So I come from the point that we're already in one union, but we shouldn't be breaking up and becoming smaller. We should be, as socialists, rubbing out the false lines on the map and saying that poverty doesn't know whether it's Scottish.
No, it does not.
Or
European, or French, or German, or Canadian, or South American, or African. How does defending the UK as the status quo advance the working class when you particularly look at the governments that are going to be returned in Westminster? How is it going to advance anybody?
Okay, I'm going to take the next question at the back there because I don't want to turn into a conversation here. It's yourself at the very, very back there. At the very back, yep. Yep.
How long do you envisage before you remove driving from the UK?
Are you going to take a few? Yeah.
How long do I envisage?
Are you going to take a few so that it's not? Yeah.
Well, I think there are a couple of issues there that I didn't want to interrupt the discussion there. One is that there is something of a quandary in this notion of an independent Scotland that says we'll get rid of Trident, but we'll maintain the umbrella, the nuclear umbrella within that NATO arrangement. So we're happy to be in the club when it needs to be used, but we don't want it here, which is a bit of a quandary in my mind to deal with it. Even if an independent Scotland decided it was going to go ahead, the best advice that seems to come from the defence chiefs and so forth is you're talking about 5 years or more before such an arrangement could take place. The other element that comes into play is that whole area of Scotland is maintained in the interests of servicing the base in the Clyde. So we've got a whole sort of community there of thousands that depend on that facility for employment. And we're going to have to come up with a plan to employ these people in a new industry. And you know from your own personal experience down here how long that takes to develop. But you asked me how long to get rid of Trident, 5 years or more. And probably it'd be more the way bureaucracy works.
Stay with the UK, how long do you live from the UK? If we stay with the UK?
Well, if you want an honest answer to that, that's been part of a conversation at world level about how do we trade off nuclear weapons. And it'll be something that'll be worked out through United Nations, and that'll be longer than 5 years if you want an honest answer. How long will it take? Who knows?
I'm going to just take a couple more questions just now because we are running tight for time. And if a woman wants to ask a question, please do, because we've only had one so far. No, I'm sorry, but we've got too many speakers. We've got too many questions now. Other people might ask about Trident as well, so it might come back to it anyway.
Just do it overnight.
Okay, Councillor.
There's a couple of points that's what basically was saying there, but instead of the fact that for the most part Steve not used a lot of what I call scaremongering language that do things here, but you didn't understand why you made the joke about divorce don't get happening. Like Caroline, I just want to say I'm happily divorced. There's actually a process we went through. We argued about how we divvied up, who could what in the house. We argued about which share of debt each party took. But you know, we get through it, it's a process. We're now both very happy. We each get different partners. We've moved on, we've grown up.
Oh, no doubt.
And that for me is, divorce is meant to scare people, but you get through it, you move on, you find better relationships, more mature relationships. And I think that's what's on offer here in terms of independence referendum. I don't think any should be scared of that. If we're just picking up on yourself, because you spoke about it's all one punitive government, but right now at Westminster, because the Scottish population is so small compared to the Middle England, we've got a punitive government, and we've got a punitive opposition in waiting who have promised to match Tory spending plans to bring to power. And he voted with the welfare cap, it was just an arbitrary number, but from now on we'll limit welfare spending to this number. The bedroom tax wasn't actually resisted properly to start with, but it's now became an issue. And the Tory philosophy for the bedroom tax was based on the local housing allowance which Labour brought in to cut benefit spending to private landlords. So right now there is no difference at Westminster level, and that's why if you're back to divorce analogy, I don't want to get divorced, and I want to be able to dictate the shape of our country. As the speakers and I have said, it's the Scottish people who would elect the Scottish government, and if they don't like the policies, they can kick that government out and re-elect the government that will want to do the bidding for them. So, see, I appreciate that's not a question as such, but I just want to pick up the points that I made.
Okay, I'm going to take two more people just now, quickly, and then I'll bring the speakers back in, and then I'll take some more. Yourself in the blue jumper.
A question that really I think concerns us all is one of currency. It's what about the top of the water at the moment. The SNP are clearly going to use some negotiating power whether to try for that to try and get the pound. And I know there is a view of voice in the past and a question mark over whether the pound should be a currency. You know, we don't know the answer to that, and unlikely to know the answer to that until after we vote. But what alternatives, for example, would you put forward as a currency as opposed to the pound?
Okay, and one more. No, in front. Yeah. Yep.
A question to both sides. What would the effect of the vote be in September on social justice? So, given that the Labour Party have said that they're going to not reverse any of the Tory spending cuts and they're going to match Tory spending cuts and so on, what is the plan for actually eradicating poverty and so on? And the same question to the yes side, which is, if there was a yes vote, how would that impact social justice and what mechanisms would be used to that end?
Okay, I'm going to start with Dennis.
Okay. On the currency, if you read the white paper, you'll see that the Scottish Government set up an independent commission, which consisted of very renowned economists, a couple of them Nobel laureates. Not that economics is an exact science, and everybody in this room, I think, can understand to some extent the pros and cons of the various currency options and make up their minds accordingly. But the Scottish Government has made it clear that they want a currency union with sterling. And they are not prepared even to talk about the possibility of a plan B. Right? But even Salmond has made it clear, you know, when pressed by various interviewers, what you want to do if the rest of the UK just say, no, you're not going to have a currency union with sterling, and that's it. And Salmond has said, well, there are other options. Read the white paper. There are other options being sterling without a currency union or an independent currency, which is one that I expressed a favour for. And the other one would be joining the euro, which might be a bit dodgy just now, but who knows, maybe in a few years' time it might be an attractive proposition. And these so-called expert economists came to the view that each one of these four options was a workable, viable proposition. But they came out and recommended the one which Salmond has plumped for. Now, at some future date, there's nothing to stop any potential government or actual future government of an independent Scotland from saying we're going to switch to a different currency, or we're going to go a different way, because there are advantages in an independent currency. For example, you would have the added advantage of being able to set your own interest rates, whereas at present, interest rates, by the way, even at present, are not set by the UK government. Gordon Brown did away with that. He transferred the power to the Monetary Committee of the Bank of England, as they do, in effect, determine the interest rate. So we wouldn't be any worse off under Salmon's idea if that becomes the practice in an independent Scotland. But ultimately, as I say, in the longer term, it will be for any potential government to put it in its manifesto, maybe even do a referendum to the people of Scotland about what they would like their currency to be. On the other question, just very briefly, the effect on social justice. Well, I've said already that the track records of the two parliaments speak for themselves. The Scottish Parliament has delivered a great degree of social justice for students, for elderly people, greater degree of social justice in the National Health Service, greater educational opportunity for children. Look at what's happening in Westminster, and look at what the opposition at Westminster are offering. It's just one brand of austerity against another brand of austerity, because Miliband has said he's going to continue the benefit cap. It took him a year to say that he's going to get rid of the bedroom tax, but as I said, the bedroom tax would have seen the light of day if we had an independent Scotland. So for all these reasons, I believe that the standards of social justice would be much higher in an independent Scotland. And that is one of the main reasons why I believe in an independent Scotland.
Okay. Pauline?
Yes, thanks. Just briefly, I know you didn't ask a question, but I think the idea of the amicable divorce that results in a new relationship, what we've been offered from the SNP would not, in fact, give us the resources to do the things that you're hoping will come out of this new relationship. What they're talking about is cuts in corporation tax that would reduce the tax base. They're not considering any increase in taxation. So they are actually hoping that the miracle will happen of the loaves and fishes, and that more will come out of less. In terms of the currency, I mean, the point that I think Dennis raised of where the levers of power lie, we don't control them at any level, and that is the nature of the fight back that we're faced with. The fact that whether we have sterling or the euro, neither would be controlled in Scotland. Neither would be controlled in Westminster. They're both controlled by external bodies, like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. They make the rules up about how currencies operate. So I think that we've got a much wider question there. And at least at a UK level, we have more muscle in that debate than we will in Scotland. Joining the euro will take many of these issues out. Joining the European Union will take...
Can you just let Pauline finish? Can you not shout out, please, because we are pushed for time.
Yeah. Membership of the EU might carry with it a requirement to be part of the euro, which again will take those matters. In terms of the social justice, I think this is the key as to how we make these changes. I'm not getting much from the white paper that tells me that these changes are going to come about. What we're getting is a partnership model between business, the government and the trade unions that will all chat together. The trade unions will become incorporated in those decisions, and they will not put working people as the priority in that debate. We've got to stop that happening. That is the root that the Commonweal, the White Paper are taking us down. I want to resist that.
Okay. I have 5 more speakers. I've got you on the list there. I've got 5 more. If anybody else wants to ask a question, can you raise your hand just now so I can get you in? I've got the woman in the middle there first of all, and then Paul. Yep. Yourself in the middle there. No, not you. Sorry, the woman in the middle. Yep. I've got you on the list. No, sorry, it's the woman in the middle. I've got you on the list.
I just want to ask a very genuine question. That's just a way on me. I think it's fine talking about socialist principles, but socialism does have to be paid for. And if we become independent, there's going to be an awful lot of uncertainty initially, which is not good for businesses and not good for the economy. How does Scotland overcome that? And what is going to be the economic driving force of Scotland as an independent country?
Thank you. And Paul?
We've got the big questions, trident, border, currency, but what I would say the biggest question in the country today, in the UK today, is poverty. Poverty in Scotland, 800,000 people in poverty in Scotland. What I want to know is, if we remain in the UK, will the welfare state come back up, or will we continue to get DLA turned into personal independent payments, bedroom cards, benefit cards, sanctions, forced into voluntary work? People, I work with the homeless, and today there was a boy who had to walk from New Mills into Kilmarnock to sign on, and he's telling me if he doesn't make his sign on time at that time, he would be sanctioned. He won't get any benefit. Last week it was announced there's 200 people in Ayrshire sanctioned to benefit. And remaining in the UK, I do not see that is going to change. But what I believe is, if we have a yes vote, we can change poverty. Because there was one thing that was devolved to the Scottish Parliament, and that's what's now called the Scottish Welfare Fund. People used to scrabble for crisis loans, and they had to pay them back. Now they can phone up their local authority in East Ayrshire and they can get a crisis grant, and they don't need to pay it back, and they'll get that within 24 hours, 48 hours, and they get it on their phone. They can go to a pay point and they can collect the money. It's not very difficult. There's new thinking. Things are happening to make it easier for people in poverty. Working with people in poverty on a daily basis is getting harder and harder and harder. So, what the plan say to that?
Thanks. And one more question. Yourself at the back there.
I'm a Labour supporter, right? And I don't see what this is going to do with Sam and the SFP. Because in 2016, I believe with another election, and then we can decide who we're going to put into power. The question I need to ask is to the low guys here. Can you guarantee if I vote no, the Liberty employee policy implemented in this country ever again?
The last part of that question. What was the last part of that?
Can you repeat the very last bit?
What I'm saying, if I vote no, can you guarantee we'll never get a policy implemented in Scotland ever again if I vote no? That's the question I need to ask.
Okay, I'm going to give you, Graham, 2 minutes. Just answer these questions.
All right. I'm going to solve the world in 2 minutes here. Well, there's the last one dealt with. The business issue is an important one.
Well, see, I just want yes or no, to be quite honest.
I'm working my way through the 3 questions. So let me deal with the first one first. The business issue is an important one. If Scotland's to have a future in this world, and we're competing with China, India, South America and the rest of the world now in production terms, we need to create jobs. We need to create industry. We need to have enterprise. People don't want to be in the blue, in my experience. Nobody wants to be poor. And through all my adult life, I've heard about social justice. And in some regards, we've come a long way in dealing with some of the issues. But there's still far too much poverty in Scotland, and there are too many people who have no opportunities and end up being involved in alcohol and drugs and all the other things that we see in our communities and then blame them for. So there's no doubt that we need to deal with business and give business the opportunity. The problem, as I see it in an independent Scotland, is that the world is conducted by multinational companies, international capital, which will trade with countries in terms of how they will do their business. Now, Simon's cute for that, and he's indicated we'll reduce our corporation tax. We'll make this an interesting place to do business. Southern Ireland did the same. And it is a race to the bottom, because international capital go to another country and say, we can do 20% there, how about you doing it for 18%, and then somebody else for 16%. The future should be about making sure these people pay their taxes and begin to pay into the system the way I've paid into the system all my working life through PAYE. If I pay in before I get it, then how come they don't? And that's one of the things that we should be looking to develop in the future. But business is important in terms of how we deliver. And it is important that we cope with these issues about poverty. The whole thing about bedroom tax, we would have still been suffering from the bedroom tax outcomes if Scottish Labour hadn't forced the government to take the necessary steps to ameliorate the impact of bedroom tax in Scotland. And what Mr Swinney said was, why should I get Westminster off the hook? We'll just leave it alone. But after a number of months of argument, he finally gave ground, and he did put money into dealing with the bedroom tax issue. And I've no doubt that England and Wales will follow that example in due course. As far as, can I give you a guarantee, all evening, what everybody has said is, I believe. It's all about what you believe will happen. I've got to say, I don't know if we can guarantee. I don't think anybody...
Look,
let me finish. Just let me finish in our sentence. I just think that we've got to work hard to make sure it doesn't happen here. Can you offer guarantees? Nobody can, on any policy.
You can offer a guarantee if you voted yes, that's a certain...
No, I don't think...
Sorry,
no, I don't think
answer,
you can.
Can I pass
I don't think you can.
Yes, I know. Madeline, can you answer, please?
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I think the first thing I want to say is a lot of these issues are quite complex and need a lot of discussion, and that's why Women for Independence actually concentrates to have small group discussions with women so that we can listen into a lot more depth. So it doesn't help when you're having to deal with things in small chunks and sound bites. The question of social justice and resources. If Scotland became independent, it would immediately be, I think the latest estimates were the 7th richest country in the world. Now, a lot of examples have been made about the potential for an independent Scotland, and it is potential, and it will be decided according to the governments that we democratically vote for. In the Commonweal that Pauline referred to, she talked about it being no good enough, no socialist enough. What it talks about is social democracy that has worked very successfully in Nordic countries, which haven't been mentioned yet. And particularly in terms of women, 9 out of the 10 countries in the world that are the best for women are all small countries of less than 9 million of a population. The top country for women in the world, and they're not quite equal yet in it, I have to say. We're not there yet, even in any country. But the top country for the world, for women in the world, is Iceland. There's no reason why Scotland wouldn't be able, with its vast natural resources and all the industries that it has, what you need is power and the political will. What has been absent in Scotland to be able to deliver social justice, equality, fairness, is both the power and the will. I can't guarantee the will be there, but I can guarantee you that the government that has the power in an independent Scotland will be a government that the people of Scotland have voted for. And it will be our responsibility. It will be our responsibility to use the resources that we have in a fair and equal way, to be responsible and not squander them for future generations. It will be our responsibility, and we'll have the power. It will not be futile. We will get away from every Westminster election being about keeping the Tories out. We'll be able to vote for something. We'll be able to vote for a vision that we actually want to deliver. And I have to say to Pauline, this is my last point, and I'll only look for a summing up speech if I do it, but if you leave me with 2 wee minutes, is that all right? Pauline's argument is essentially that the SNP's white paper Now remember, the referendum question is, should Scotland be an independent country? It's one question with a very easy answer, yes or no. The process comes thereafter. But Pauline's argument is that the SNP's white paper and what will happen in that process thereafter isn't it left-wing enough? It isn't socialism? So why defend the UK? Is Westminster socialism? Is Westminster left-wing? Are the Tories socialism? Is Ed Miliband socialism? Is Nick Clegg socialism? When do you predict Westminster will deliver socialism? The Commonweal is social democracy, and the SNP even aspire to the Commonweal. The SNP aspire to the vision of the Nordic countries, which, despite not being socialist, and in your analysis I would agree that it's no socialist, they're the least unequal countries in the world. They're a high-wage economy where people, women particularly, report higher standard of living, higher quality of life. Childcare is like 20 quid a month, if that. So, whilst we on the left, and I'm critical of myself on the left here, have been fighting amongst ourselves for decades in the UK about who's left enough, who's the next left-wing, who's the next revolutionary, who's got the best next left-wing vision. The Nordic countries have been delivering more equal and fairer societies. And we're an independent country with similar resources, a similar sized population and very similar values and principles, we would have the chance to at least deliver that. And I'm with Pauline, I want more, I want better. But if I was going to put a bet on in the bookies in terms of who or what parliament or what government, what system, what nation state, what unit of organising is most likely to deliver socialism, a Scottish Parliament or a Westminster Parliament? I mean, really, how many steps too far does it take? What do they need to do? We've had Guantanamo Bay in support for that, we've had extraordinary rendition, we've had the Iraq War, we've got people in sanctions, they're proposing people signing on every day with a bus fare to get there. What will it take to be too much? When is enough enough? And when are you going to take responsibility to deliver a government we vote for and take the responsibility if they make an arse of it and vote them out and vote another one in? At least we will have the power to do that. With Westminster,
Thanks for that, Carol. Sorry. I feel like we should all leave now.
Sorry.
Right, I do have 4 more questions. I'm just wondering, we've got 10 minutes left here. I wonder if the 4 people could just ask their questions and maybe the speakers, I could give them a wee bit longer to answer the questions and do their summing up all at once, so that we should hopefully be finished in time, if that's okay with everybody. Yep, okay. I've got yourself at the back there with the check shirt on. Yep, you first of all.
It's a question for me, really. Obviously, it's 2 ideologies in politics, as far as I'm concerned. We've got Conservative, we've got Labour. We also joined the Labour for socialist principles. What I can't understand is how you can defend denying achieving those principles by voting, encouraging people to vote no. Any answer?
Okay. You don't want to ask your question? Okay. Yep.
My question's quite similar. Graham, I think you speak very well. In fact, I think you do a better job than Alistair Calley. I've got a lot of family here, and I'm actually worried to give you another chance to speak because I'm in the yes camp, pretty firmly. But my question is, you said that Scotland can be a successful independent country. And as everyone accepts now, if the status quo is more than 70,000 Scots going to food banks in the last financial year, something which is on the rise and rise and rise due to brutal welfare policy coming from Westminster. The UK being the third most unequal country in the world. I mean, how could Scotland, as an independent country, possibly do anything like that?
I'd like to know the difference that would happen if we became independent, maybe more from a women's point of view about jobs, and how that will impact families, especially in our local communities, and pensions. Because a lot of head offices are in England, and is the rules going to change? You know, what will happen if head offices want to all go to England? And what will happen then about jobs in Scotland?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to bring the speakers back in now in the reverse order from the way they spoke at the beginning. I'm also going to ask if you could fill in your second ballot paper, and again a bucket will go round for you to put it in. The results of that will be published in the Kilmarnock Standards, and Unison will also email that around. Right, Dennis?
Yes, I'd like to address the very good question that was put by a colleague. He said that in the trade union movement there is strength and unity and solidarity, and what message would we be sending out to other Unison members in the event of a yes vote in the referendum? Well, can I just say this? That the advance of socialism is not always at a uniform pace in every land or every part of every land. Sometimes there's a breakthrough in a country, sometimes a wee country, or sometimes part of a country. And I mean, there's a basic democratic principle to that. No country has a right, or no country should have a right to call a veto on socialist advance in any other country. And at present, the United Kingdom Constitution is acting as a straitjacket or a brake on socialist advance in Scotland. And I also believe that if we did have socialist progress in Scotland, then people in other countries, including in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, would sit up and take notice and say, hey, if the Scots can get a better national health service than what we've got, why can't we have that? And they put pressure on the Labour Party and the trade union movement in other parts of the United Kingdom to fight for similar advances. Now, if I can turn to the matter of the economy, can we afford this independence? Well, Caroline answered that very well, I thought. It's also worth pointing out, if you look at the government expenditure and revenue reports over the past 5 years or so, and you aggregate the figures, then Scotland is contributing a higher proportion of UK taxation, but getting back a smaller proportion of UK spending. So that seems to indicate that independence is certainly affordable. What would be the economic driving force of an independent Scotland? Well, there's a great deal of emphasis, maybe too much, certainly the Scottish Green Party would say there's too much emphasis on oil and gas reserves, but there are other energy reserves too, of course, in the renewables. And I firmly believe, I'm all in favour of combining the exploitation of our oil and gas reserves while at the same time minimising damage to the environment, etc. I also believe that we should have an oil and gas development fund whereby we use the revenues to diversify our economy. We have got other strengths in the Scottish economy, but some of them need to be strengthened by further investment so that we do have a diversified, strong Scottish economy, not just in the energy sector, but food and drink and financial services, construction industry, agriculture, fisheries, and so on. Eradication of poverty, yes, we all want to see it. And independence is not going to be a sudden overnight panacea. Of course, there are going to be big challenges and big problems. But the thing is, at present, we don't have the economic levers to eradicate poverty from Scotland. If we had full powers of taxation, we'd be able to introduce a progressive system of taxation whereby the rich pay more, the poor pay less, and the very poor pay no tax at all. And similarly, a fairer system of benefits, including the abolition of this bedroom tax. By the way, Graham, I have to say this, that the last time it was debated in Westminster, a lot of the Scottish Labour MPs didn't even turn up to vote on the issue, including, I believe, the deputy leader of the Scottish Labour Party didn't even turn up to vote against the bedroom tax. But the fact that the bedroom tax would never have seen the light of day in an independent Scotland. And I do think that the mood in Scotland is a fairer system of tax, a fairer system of benefits, including pensions, which was mentioned. And it's worth pointing out that our expenditure on benefits, including pensions, as a proportion of our GDP, is actually less than what it is in the rest of the UK. And it's also worth pointing out the different demographics in Scotland, whereby the life expectancy in many parts of Scotland, Scotland in general, is less than what it is in the rest of the UK. So you've got a lot of people paying into pensions, and I'm not just talking about the state pension here, through their national insurance contributions to taxation, but a lot of people paying into private pension funds. The same amount they're putting in year after year after year, and yet because the life expectancy is lower, you've got some comparatively rich guy in Surrey living comfortably until the age of 80, 85, 90, while the poor guy in the East End of Glasgow is kicking the bucket at the age of 65 or 66. So you've got to look at these different demographics in Scotland. We have to also attract more young people. Yeah, I'm just finishing. And we don't have control as yet of the immigration in order to try and bring more workers into the working population and bring some of the young Scots who have gone away to other areas, trying to bring them back or encouraging them to stay in the first instance. My final point is this. Somebody mentioned that they were a Labour supporter, and that this is not simply a recipe for a one-party rule by the SNP forever and ever. I don't think so either. I was virtually born and brought up in the Labour Party. My late grandfather was one of the founding members of the Labour Party in the county of Fife. And I spent all of my parliamentary career, if you can call it that, at Westminster as a Labour MP. And I'm very, very, very disappointed, to say the least, at how the Labour Party, my old party, has turned out. I honestly think that in an independent Scotland there is a good chance of a Labour Party renaissance, and I'll tell you briefly why. Because at present, part of the problem that the Labour Party has is it's looking over his shoulder all the time to see what the bosses down at Westminster are saying. Whereas if we had an independent Scottish Labour Party, that independent Scottish Labour Party would be far more responsive and far more accountable to the needs and the priorities of the people of Scotland. So that's why I think that we have higher standards of social justice in Scotland, and it may very well be, if the Labour Party gets its act together, I really do think that the Scottish Labour Party can have a renaissance and look forward to being a future government in an independent Scotland. Thank you.
Given up her opportunity to sum up, but she has said that because she runs helps to organise the Women for Independence campaign, if any women want to speak to her at the end, she'll be more than happy to do that, to give you some information. So I'll go to Pauline next.
Thank you. Just a reminder that it's actually 22 years since the Tories won a majority in Westminster. In the 1955 election, the Tories won an outright majority of the votes in Scotland. There is not anything in the Scottish blood, the Scottish DNA, or the English blood, or the English DNA that makes one different to the other. It's our experience in this world that does it. It's the fights we experience on a daily basis. The pensioner who dies young in the East End of Glasgow is also matched by the pensioner who lives longer in Bearsden and Mulgai. This is not a cross-border issue. It's an issue of us as a class fighting for our demands. I would love it if there was a shortcut to achieving this. My God, I'm getting old. I need this to happen more than some of you here. I should be far more impatient, but I'm sorry, there is no shortcut. We have to build for it. The Nordic countries are not the model we should be following, not because they don't have good ideas, but they're in exactly the same position as us. They're being pushed by international capital to give up the gains they've made. They're actually losing the power of their trade union movement that provides their welfare benefit, by the way. They're going into privatisation in just the same way as we are. Racism is growing in just the same way it is, and don't think for a minute we don't have that in Scotland. My first football match, I saw Mark Walters being bombarded by Celtic supporters throwing bananas at him. They said, oh, it wasn't racism, it was a sense of humour. Don't think for a minute we don't have the potential for those sorts of problems here. What we do need to do is to identify where the best point of delivery of power is. I think the questions of poverty should be addressed at a local level. And what do we have from the Scottish Government? We've had a council tax freeze that has prevented being able to put resources into anti-poverty strategies at a local level. We've got to fight for our right locally to be able to decide what powers we need and then decide what goes upwards. And whether that's to a Scottish Parliament, whether it's to a UK Parliament, whether it's to Europe. I'm a firm believer in a radical federal solution for the UK. I think that we could learn a hell of a lot from what's happening in Wales, where a Labour-led administration has led the way, for instance, on prescription charges and other issues, that they are actually arguing for a convention of the UK, a constitutional convention, where we can sit down together and decide the best way of sharing power within the UK. And that should also empower people in the regions of England. Because whatever the ultimate solution for the UK, the real problems facing us are not constitutional, they're political. And it's how we create a more equal society and achieve greater democratic control, not just in parliaments, that isn't good enough. Greater economic control through public ownership, through the common ownership of the resources we have, through workers' control. Those are the issues that we should be looking for, and not think we can find this in a new parliament that will have within it as representatives the self-same people who are there now. We've got to expect more than that. And that's why I would say the fight is much more fundamental than what we're being offered on the 18th of September. On the 19th of September, we'll wake up and we'll find not much has changed.
Thank you. I said right at the beginning of the evening that the experts on this issue are you yourselves. You need to make a judgment on the balance of your own beliefs, how you judge the world operates, how you think governments deliver on your behalf, and where you think interests will be reflected in going forward. The one thing I'd also remind you is there are no gains for everybody in this situation. We talk about our first-class tertiary education in universities and so forth. We also know that behind the scenes we've lost more than 60,000 college places because of the money that's been invested in providing free education at university. So the idea that every student in Scotland's done well out of it isn't true. It's about decisions, about deciding, do you put your money here or do you put it there? Do you invest in this corner or do you put it in that corner? And that's what governments and that's what politics is all about. So in judging, why do I think that the United Kingdom is that first platform upon which I think social justice will be delivered? I do believe that as an island nation, as Britain, 66 million of us together have more in common and we have more identity that we share than separate us in terms of our interests. And that economy that we have as Britain has more resilience to be able to resist some of the buffeting that we've received in this last 2 decades. I would never have believed that the Royal Bank of Scotland would have got itself into the state that it did get itself in. I would never have believed that it was on its knees. I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this any more than anybody else on the panel and the audience knows, what would have happened had we had an independent Scotland with the Royal Bank of Scotland as part of our financial future?
Iceland jailed their bankers.
Still, it's a jail. And nobody believes more than I do that there's some bankers in Britain need jail too. But jailing the bankers would have put money in our pockets. The money still went, and for some reason, 8 years on, we still don't know where it went to. Because billions disappeared out of our economy, and nobody to this day can tell us who's got it, because somebody's got it. It didn't just evaporate. So in my view, the United Kingdom is that platform that gives us some stability, some ability to have a security around us, and a whole range of things that we've discussed here this evening. And the provision of a Scottish Parliament, which was achieved within the Union. That Parliament has developed an ability to deliver very specifically on the kinds of interests that we have here in Scotland and the types of beliefs that we have in taking ourselves forward in the future. Now, you might disagree with that. You might see it differently, and some of you did from the moment you walked in the room here tonight, and I'm not going to convince you otherwise. Some people have got a different view of it. I think the important thing in what's happened here tonight is we respect each other's point of view. The other important thing is whatever happens at the end of this summer in this independence vote, we need to get on with life. If you think 1.4 billion people in China are sitting wondering what Scotland's going to do about the future and taking account of that and the way they see their life forward, you'll have in a different universe to me. We are competing in the world economy. We are competing in the world market. And whatever the decision is in September, we need to get our noses to the grindstone. What I've learned, I was brought up in a working class family, a dad who was a railwayman who laid many of the tracks here that trains run on and broke his heart when we were all ripped up under Dr. Beecham. And what I learned from him is you get nothing for nothing in this life. And Scotland will get nothing for nothing in the future. I believe within a United Kingdom platform, we can find our way in this future world, which in my view is becoming more dangerous and less predictable than ever, in the way it's breaking down into its bits, and the way we get these funny wee dictators popping up and causing mayhem. We need to take account of all that. My belief is, within a United Kingdom environment, we're better placed for protecting our beliefs for the future. Sorry? I'm sorry, I can't... No, I don't think Tony... I don't agree with...
Okay, can you not shout out, please, because we're nearly finished.
I'm not trying to catch.
I mean, I don't agree with the fact that we became involved in these conflicts, but we can go back in history and pluck out names all we. It's today we're talking about and tomorrow. We learn the lessons of yesterday and make sure we don't repeat them. That's why I'm part of Scottish Labour. I came into Scottish Labour because I didn't like the way in which politics right across the gambit were being conducted. And I don't think that any of the parties have virtues in that regard. So I stand by the beliefs that I have. I will always argue for those beliefs, but I also respect that other people have a right to believe otherwise. And if democracy proves that we go in one direction or the other direction, I will respect that, and I will hope that Scotland will have a future and that our young people will have hope and ambition in the way that I had hope and ambition when I was a teenager, because that's absent just now, and we need to put that back in place.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. Like I said, somebody's been videoing this for us this evening, so we'll go on YouTube and I'll email the link around to you all. I've actually got the results of the ballots here already. Jackie did a very fast job of counting them up for us all. There is leaflets at the back, though, if anybody wants to take anything away, and I'm sure some of the speakers will be around later on after this is finished if you want to ask them any questions. There's also Unison questionnaires on the chairs, and I've got some here for any Unison members who just want any feedback from the branch about anything at all. And there's also recruitment forms for anybody who's not a member of Unison and is thinking of joining. I've got the results though, so I'm sure you're all dying to know. At the beginning of the debate, when we did the first ballot, the votes were 28 people for yes, 8 for no, and 12 for don't know. And by the end, the don't knows had fallen to 4, the noes had also fallen to 7, and the yeses were up to 33. So. So again, thank you all very much for coming, and thank you all.